October 19, 1943, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. Temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit, light drizzle. Ordnance Colonel James Carey stands in the observation bunker, binoculars pressed against his face, watching something that should not be possible. 600 yards downrange, a captured German Panther tank sits at a precise angle, its 80mm frontal glacis plate presenting the worst possible geometry for penetration. Beside Carey, a young engineer named John Hinds nervously checks his stopwatch. The Sherman tank with the experimental 76mm gun sits ready, its longer barrel extending almost comically from the turret designed for the standard 75. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Hinds gives the signal. Fire. The sharp crack echoes across the proving ground. Through his binoculars, Carey watches the tracer arc toward the Panther. He's seen this test fail 17 times in the past 6 weeks. The shell hits, and something unprecedented happens. The German armor plate, pride of Krupp Steelworks, shatters. The projectile penetrates completely, emerging from the rear of the target in a spray of metal fragments. Carey lowers his binoculars slowly. "Run that again," he says quietly. "I need to see that again." What Colonel Carey didn't know at that moment was that he'd just witnessed the solution to a problem that was killing American tank crews by the hundreds. The standard Sherman, with its 75mm gun, couldn't penetrate a Panther beyond 100 yards. German tank commanders had learned to simply keep their distance and pick off Shermans like shooting gallery targets. The mathematics were brutal and getting worse. But John Hinds, a 32-year-old engineer who'd never designed a weapon in his life before Pearl Harbor, had just made the Sherman dangerous. At ranges the Germans thought were completely safe. He'd done it by ignoring every piece of conventional wisdom the Ordnance Department held sacred. And in doing so, he'd created what German tankers would come to call the long-nosed devil, a Sherman that could kill Panthers head-on at distances that seemed impossible. June 6, 1943. 5 months earlier. Rock Island, Arsenal, Illinois. The crisis meeting begins badly and gets worse. Major General Gladion Barnes, Chief of Research and Development for the Ordnance Department, spreads reconnaissance photographs across the conference table. They show German Panther tanks photographed near Kursk. "Gentlemen," Barnes begins, "we have a problem that threatens to make the entire Sherman program obsolete." The officers around the table study the images. The Panther's profile is unmistakable, low, sleek, with a gun barrel that seems impossibly long for the turret size. Captain Thomas Edison Williams, senior ballistics engineer, does quick calculations on a notepad. "If the intelligence estimates are correct," Williams says, "that's a 75mm gun with a barrel length of approximately 70 calibers. Muzzle velocity probably exceeds 3,100 feet per second. 3,150, Barnes corrects. "We captured documents from Tunisia, the WK-42 cannon. It penetrates 140 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters. The silence in the room is profound. Every man present knows what this means. The Sherman's 75mm M3 gun penetrates perhaps 60 millimeters at 1,000 meters. Against a Panther's 80mm frontal armor, the Sherman must close to point-blank range where the Panther will kill it effortlessly. How many Panthers are in production?" Someone asks. "Unknown. Hundreds certainly, perhaps thousands by next year." Barnes pulls out another document. This is from 1st Armored Division after operations in Tunisia. Loss. Ratio in tank versus tank combat. 4.3 Shermans lost for every German tank destroyed, and that's mostly against Mark IIIs and IVs. Once Panthers arrive in numbers, that ratio will become catastrophic. John Hinds, sitting at the far end of the table, speaks for the first time. "We need a bigger gun." Barnes looks at him with barely concealed irritation. Hinds has been with the Ordnance Department for only 18 months, recruited from Chrysler's engineering division. "So, thank you, Mr. Hinds. We're all aware we need more firepower. The question is how to achieve it within the Sherman's existing turret ring diameter." The Sherman's turret ring, the circular opening in the hull, where the turret sits, measures 69 inches in diameter. This physical constraint determines the maximum size of gun that can fit inside the turret while still allowing the crew to operate. Every major gun design in the American inventory has been evaluated. All are too large. What about the British 17-pounder? William suggests. Already evaluated, Barnes replies. The recoil system is too long. It won't fit in the Sherman turret without major redesign. We'd need to widen the turret ring, which means redesigning the entire hull. That's 18 months minimum. 18 months, Hines says quietly, is about 9,000 dead tank crews. Barnes stares at him. 18 months. Do you have a better suggestion, Mr. Hines? Yes, sir. We design a new gun from scratch, purpose-built for the Sherman turret constraints. The room erupts in objections. Design a new tank gun from scratch? The last American tank gun design took 5 years from concept to production. The 75mm M3 gun, currently in the Sherman, was developed in 1937 and didn't reach production until 1942. Whozo? Mr. Hines, Barnes says with exaggerated patience. Designing a high-velocity anti-tank gun requires extensive research, metallurgical testing, propellant, development, and ballistic evaluation. We're not talking about automotive components. We're talking about containing pressures exceeding 20 tons per square inch, while accelerating a projectile to velocities that I can have a working prototype in 16 weeks. Hines interrupts. The room falls silent. Barnes leans forward. 16 weeks? That's absurd. It's necessary. The Panthers will be in France before summer. We need an answer before D-Day, or we'll be sending our tankers into a slaughter. Even if you could design the gun in 16 weeks, which you can't, we don't have suitable ammunition. The 76mm anti-aircraft round doesn't have sufficient penetration. Hines pulls a technical manual from his briefcase. The 3-inch M7 anti-aircraft gun fires a projectile at 2,800 feet per second with excellent armor penetration. The 76mm is the same caliber, just a different designation. We adapt the 3-inch ammunition to a new 76mm tank gun. The projectile already exists. We just need the gun to fire it. William studies Hines with new interest. You'd be starting with the ammunition and designing the gun around it? That's backwards. It's fast. Everything we need already exists in some form. The 3-inch ammunition, the Sherman turret dimensions, the recoil systems from existing weapons. We're not inventing, we're adapting. Barnes considers this. You'd still need to solve muzzle velocity. The 3-inch AA gun achieves 2,800 feet per second with a barrel length of 50 calibers. To fit in a Sherman turret, you'd be limited to maybe 40 calibers. The velocity would drop significantly. Then we increase the propellant charge, which increases chamber pressure beyond safe limits. Then we redesign the chamber for higher pressure. It's engineering, General. Everything's a trade-off. We keep trading until we find the solution. Barnes looks at the young engineer for a long moment. There's something in Hines' confidence that's either genius or delusion. 16 weeks, Barnes finally says. You have 16 weeks to prove this is possible. If you succeed, I'll push it through production channels. If you fail, we move on to other solutions. I'll need a team. 4 engineers, 3 machinists, unlimited machine shop access, and priority requisition authority. Done. You report progress weekly. And Mr. Hines? The men who'll use this weapon are already training for D-Day. Don't waste their time. Hines gathers his materials. General, I'm going to give them a gun that kills Panthers at 600 yards. That's not wasting anyone's time. 2 weeks later, June 20th, 1943, Rock Island Arsenal Machine Shop No. 7. The design is taking shape on drafting tables that stay covered 20 hours per day. Hines has assembled his team: William Chase, a weapons designer from Springfield Armory; Robert Harrison, a metallurgist from Bethlehem Steel; James Kelly, an ammunition specialist from Picatinny Arsenal; and Frank Torres, a mechanical engineer who worked on the M3 75mm gun. They work from a principle that seems obvious in retrospect, but revolutionary in practice. Start with what exists and modify the minimum necessary to achieve the goal. The 3-inch M7 anti-aircraft gun provides the starting point. Its ammunition is powerful and available. Its ballistics are well understood. But the gun itself is massive, designed for a fixed mounting on heavy vehicles like the M10 tank destroyer. It weighs over 2,000 pounds and extends over 13 feet in length. The challenge is creating a weapon with similar performance that weighs less than 1,000 pounds and fits in a space roughly 7 feet long, including the recoil system. Chase sketches the basic concept. We keep the breech block design from the M7. It's proven and robust. We shorten the barrel to 42 calibers. That's about 10 feet for a 76mm bore. We design a new recoil system specifically for the Sherman turret's available space. Muzzle velocity? Hines asks. With the shorter barrel, probably 2,600 to 2,700 feet per second, using standard propellant charges. Not enough. The math says we need at least 2,900 feet per second to reliably penetrate the Panther's glacis at combat ranges. Harrison, the metallurgist, looks up from his calculations. Higher velocity means higher chamber pressure. The M7 operates at around 38,000 pounds per square inch. To get 2,900 feet per second from a shorter barrel, you're looking at 50,000 psi minimum. Can steel handle that? High-grade carbon steel, properly heat-treated? Yes, but you're pushing the margins. Every gun will need to be proof-tested beyond normal limits. Torres adds another concern. Higher pressure means more violent recoil. The Sherman's turret basket can only handle so much force before it starts cracking welds. We need a recoil system that absorbs energy without transferring excessive force to the mounting. The problems cascade. Increase velocity, which increases pressure, which requires stronger steel, which increases weight, which requires better recoil absorption, which requires more space, which doesn't exist. It's a circular problem with no obvious solution. Hines stands at the drafting table, staring at the sketches. Everyone waits for him to acknowledge the impossibility. Instead, he grabs a pencil. We're thinking about this wrong. We're trying to design a perfect gun. We don't need perfect. We need good enough, soon enough. He begins sketching rapidly. The barrel. We make it from the highest grade steel available, but we don't overthink it. A simple monotube design with a screwed-in breech ring. No fancy liners or complex fabrication. If it wears out faster than ideal, we replace it. Production speed matters more than longevity. The recoil system. We adapt the mechanism from the 75mm M3 gun already in the Sherman. It's proven, it's available, and we know it fits. We increase the buffer spring tension to handle the higher recoil energy. The mount. We use the existing Sherman turret mounting with minimal modification. The gun needs to fit where the 75 currently sits, using the same bolt patterns and elevation mechanism. Chase studies the concept. It's crude. It's achievable. We're not building a masterpiece. We're building a weapon that gives our tankers a fighting chance. Everything else is secondary. By July 4, 1943, the first technical drawings are complete. The weapon designated T1 is remarkably simple compared to other contemporary tank guns. The barrel is a thick-walled tube, machined from forged steel. The breech uses a vertical sliding block copied directly from the M7 anti-aircraft gun. The recoil system is an enlarged version of the mechanism from the 75mm gun. The entire weapon measures 9 feet 11 inches from breech face to muzzle and weighs 940 pounds without ammunition. It's designed to fire the 3-inch M79 armor-piercing projectile at a muzzle velocity of 2,920 feet per second using a modified propellant charge. On paper, this performance should penetrate 92 millimeters of armor at 1,000 yards at 30 degrees angle of impact. That's sufficient to defeat the Panther's frontal armor at combat ranges. On paper, July 18, 1943. The first prototype barrel emerges from the forge at Watervliet Arsenal in New York. The steel is still hot enough to glow dull red as it's moved to the cooling racks. Harrison personally supervises the heat treatment process. The barrel must be strong enough to contain chamber pressures exceeding 50,000 psi, while remaining flexible enough not to shatter under thermal stress. It's a narrow window. The heat treatment takes 6 days. Slow cooling in temperature-controlled ovens, reheating to precise temperatures, rapid quenching in oil baths. Each step crystallizes the steel's molecular structure in specific ways that determine its final properties. One mistake ruins months of work. On July 24th, the barrel completes its final machine work. The bore is polished to mirror smoothness. The rifling, the spiral grooves that spin the projectile, is cut with precision, measuring to 10,000ths of an inch. The chamber is reamed to exact dimensions. The barrel is a masterpiece of machine work. Whether it will survive firing is another question entirely. August 2nd, 1943. Aberdeen Proving Ground. The T1 prototype is ready for proof testing. The gun is mounted in a massive concrete fixture that eliminates all variables except the weapon itself. If anything fails, it will be the gun, not the mounting. The first test uses a reduced charge 80% of the designed propellant load. If the weapon survives this, they'll gradually increase to full charge, then be on to test safety margins. Hinzer, Chasey, Harrison, and Colonel Barnes watch from the observation bunker. The firing is done remotely using an electrical trigger. Fire 1, the range officer announces. The trigger is pressed. The weapon erupts. The blast is sharp and violent, louder than the Sherman 75. Smoke jets backward from the breech. The recoil system compresses, absorbing energy, then returns the gun to battery. Everyone rushes to inspect the weapon. The barrel is intact. The breech shows no signs of stress. The recoil system performed as designed. Chamber pressure, Hines asks, 42,000 psi, well within design limits. They fire 5 more rounds at 80% charge. All successful. The weapon is functioning exactly as predicted. Full charge. Barnes orders. The propellant load is increased to 100% of design specifications. This should produce muzzle velocity of approximately 2,900 feet per second and chamber pressure around 50,000 psi. It's at the edge of what the gun's design should tolerate. Fire 7. The explosion is noticeably more violent. The recoil is sharper, but the gun survives. Instruments measure muzzle velocity at 2,895 feet per second, chamber pressure at 49,200 psi. Both numbers are almost exactly on target. They fire 20 rounds at full charge. The weapon performs flawlessly. Barnes looks at Hines with something approaching respect. 10 weeks. You designed and built a functioning high-velocity tank gun in 10 weeks. We still need to test it in an actual Sherman turret. Static testing is one thing. Installation and combat simulation are different. How soon? 2 weeks to fabricate the turret modifications. Then we test. What Hines doesn't say aloud is his deepest concern. The gun works mechanically. But will it work tactically? Will it fit in the cramped Sherman turret in a way that allows the crew to actually fight with it? Will the blast and recoil be tolerable for men working in an enclosed steel box? Will the sighting system allow accurate fire at combat ranges? These questions can only be answered by putting the weapon in a tank and seeing what happens. If the answers are negative, 10 weeks of work become worthless. August 16th, 1943. Aberdeen Proving Ground. Sherman Test Vehicle Number 7. The modified Sherman sits on the range, looking subtly different from standard models. The turret is the same basic shape, but the gun extending from the mantlet is noticeably longer, thinner, and more aggressive-looking than the stubby 75mm. Inside the turret, the changes are more dramatic. The longer gun intrudes further into the fighting compartment. The gunner's position is more cramped. The commander's position is barely affected, but the loader now has to work around a gun breech that moves through a larger arc when elevating. Sergeant Michael Calloway, a veteran tank commander pulled from Fort Knox for testing duty, climbs into the commander's position. His crew, gunner, loader, and driver take their stations. Tight, Calloway mutters, but workable. The first test is simple. Traverse the turret 360 degrees, elevate and depress the gun through its full range, verify that nothing jams, breaks, or interferes with crew operations. The turret rotates smoothly. The gun elevates and depresses without issue. Load training round, Calloway orders. The loader, Corporal James Dietrich, retrieves a dummy 76mm round from the ready rack. It's noticeably longer and heavier than the 75mm ammunition they're accustomed to. Dietrich lifts the round, swings it toward the breech, and rams it home. The movement is awkward. The longer round requires a different motion pattern, but it works. Ready, Dietrich confirms. Target, tank, 900 yards. The gunner, Corporal William Jackson, calls out. He peers through his telescopic sight, adjusting for range. Identified. Fire. Jackson presses the trigger. The 76mm roars. Inside the turret, the blast pressure is tremendous. The muzzle brake helps, but 70% of the propellant gas still vents inside the confined space. The noise is physically painful despite hearing protection. The recoil slams the gun backward against its restraints, then returns forward. Smoke fills the turret. Jesus Christ. Dietrich coughs. That's loud. But the target, a sheet of armor plate at 900 yards, shows a clean penetration. The round went exactly where Jackson aimed it. They fire 20 rounds over the next hour. With each shot, the crew becomes slightly more efficient. They learn the gun's quirks, adapt their movements to the tighter space, develop rhythm. By round 20, they're loading and firing at a rate approaching the standard Sherman speed. Calloway climbs out of the turret, ears ringing despite protection. Hines and Barnes are waiting. "Honest assessment, Sergeant," Barnes says. "Can you fight with this weapon?" Calloway considers carefully. It's louder, the fumes are worse, and the ammunition is harder to handle. "But, sir, if this gun can kill Panthers at range, every one of those problems is acceptable. I'd rather be temporarily deaf than permanently dead." Accuracy? Outstanding. Jackson put 20 rounds into a 3-foot circle at 900 yards. With the 75, we're guessing beyond 400. This gun shoots like a rifle. Barnes turns to Hines. "Production timeline. If we start now, first production guns could reach units by January of 1944. That's 5 months. D-Day is scheduled for late spring. That gives us maybe 4 months to produce and ship enough guns to re-equip the assault divisions. It's possible. The design is simple enough for mass production. Multiple manufacturers can tool up in parallel." Barnes makes his decision. "Full production authorization. Priority 1. Every resource you need. I want 500 guns by April 1st. He pauses. "And Hines? This weapon is going to save a lot of lives. Well done." September through December 1943. The production ramp-up. 3 manufacturers receive contracts: Rock Island Arsenal, Watervliet Arsenal, and Continental Motors. Each facility must tool up to produce the 76mm T1 gun, now officially designated the M1A1 76mm gun. The challenges are primarily in barrel production. High-grade gun steel is in short supply, with competing demands from artillery, anti-aircraft, and naval gun programs. Hines personally coordinates with the War Production Board to secure priority allocation. Breech blocks are less problematic. The design is simple, using the vertical sliding block from the M7 anti-aircraft gun with minimal modification. Any facility with heavy machine tools can produce them. Recoil systems require more sophisticated manufacturing, but leverage existing component designs. By late October, production is flowing from all 3 facilities. Quality control becomes Hines's obsession. Every barrel is proof-tested beyond design specifications. Every completed gun is test-fired before shipment. Reject rates hover around 12% high by automotive standards, but acceptable for weapons where failure means crew deaths. The first production M1A1 guns shipped to ordnance depots in late December 1943. They're accompanied by detailed installation instructions, training manuals, and ammunition. The guns will be retrofitted into existing Shermans, creating what will officially be designated the M4A176W. The W stands for wet, referring to water jackets around ammunition storage that reduce fire risk. But everyone simply calls them 76 Shermans to distinguish them from the standard 75mm models. By March 1944, approximately 476 Shermans have been converted or newly built with the 76mm gun. They're being shipped to England for the D-Day invasion. Tank crews train with the new weapon, learning its capabilities and limitations. The gun has an effective range against armor, exceeding 1,000 yards, more than triple the 75's effective range. But it fires more slowly due to heavier ammunition and produces more crew fatigue from blast overpressure. Gunnery training emphasizes first-round hits. With the 75, tankers had learned to fire ranging shots and adjust. With the 76, ammunition supply limitations make every shot count. The weapon is accurate enough to make first-round kills routine at combat. Ranges. April 10th, 1944. 3rd Armored Division, training exercise. Tidworth, England. Lieutenant Robert Early commands a platoon of 576 Shermans, facing a company of standard 75 Shermans in a mock engagement. The exercise simulates encountering German armor at range. If you find this story engaging, Please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The 75 Shermans, playing the role of Panthers, advance across open ground. At 1,200 yards, they're beyond the effective range of their own guns but don't know it. Early's platoon opens fire at 900 yards. In theory, using training ammunition, all 5 Panthers are destroyed before they close to effective range. The exercise demonstrates what battlefield mathematics would soon confirm. The 76 Sherman has reversed the engagement dynamic. Instead of needing to close desperately while being shot to pieces, 76 Shermans can engage at ranges where German tanks are dangerous. It's not parity. Panthers still have advantages in armor and gunpowder, but it's no longer a massacre. June 6, 1944. D-Day. Omaha Beach. The 76 Shermans land with assault waves, grinding up the beaches under heavy fire. Their primary targets aren't tanks. German armor is largely absent from the beach defenses, but fortifications and strongpoints. The 76mm high-explosive round proves devastating against concrete bunkers. By nightfall, approximately 40 76 Shermans are ashore and pushing inland. Their crews don't yet know it, but they're carrying the answer to a problem they'll face within days. June 13, 1944. Villers-Bocage, France. First major engagement. The Battle of Villers-Bocage is primarily remembered for British tank losses to German Tiger tanks, but on the American sector, 7 miles east, a different story unfolds. Captain John Mitchell's company of 12 Shermans, 4 with 76s, 8 with 75s, encounters 6 Panthers advancing through hedgerow country. Mitchell's 4 76 Shermans are positioned as overwatch, while the 75 Shermans maneuver. The first Panther appears at 700 yards. Before it can identify targets, Mitchell's gunner fires. The 76mm round hits the Panther's glacis plate slightly off-center. The penetration is clean. The Panther erupts in flames. The other Panthers immediately reverse, seeking cover. But Mitchell's other 76 Shermans have clear lines of fire. In 90 seconds, 3 Panthers are destroyed. The remaining 2 escape into dense bocage where visibility drops to less than 100 yards. Mitchell's after-action report is carefully worded but clear. The 76mm gun performed as designed. Penetration of enemy heavy armor was achieved at ranges previously considered safe for enemy vehicles. Crew confidence in weapon capabilities is very high. The report circulates rapidly through division headquarters, then Corps, then Army Command. Within a week, urgent requests flow back to the United States. Send more 76 Shermans immediately. The assessment is unanimous. This weapon changes the tactical equation. July through August, 1944. Normandy hedgerow fighting. The 76 Sherman proves its value in conditions nobody anticipated. The hedgerows of Normandy create a claustrophobic battlefield where visibility rarely exceeds 200 yards. Tanks must advance through narrow lanes between impenetrable walls of vegetation and earth. Ambush is a constant threat. In this environment, the 76's advantages shift. Long-range penetration matters less than the weapon's hitting power at close range. The 76mm high-explosive round, loaded when armor isn't expected, proves devastating against infantry positions, machine gun nests, and German anti-tank guns. The armor-piercing round, when needed suddenly at point-blank range, punches through any German armor with certainty. Tank commanders learn to position 76 Shermans at key points where fields of fire are longer. When a column must advance through a hedgerow lane, 76 leads. If a Panther or Tiger appears, the 76 engages while 75 Shermans maneuver for flank shots. By late July, doctrine was evolving around the weapon's capabilities. The official guidance is simple. 76 Shermans are tank killers, 75 Shermans are infantry support. But reality is messier. There are never enough 76s, so tank companies must blend capabilities. A typical company might have 4 76s and 12 75s, forcing commanders to constantly decide where to position their limited heavy hitters. German tankers begin recognizing the 76 Sherman by its longer barrel. Captured documents show German tactical guidance changing. Engage long-barrel Shermans first, at maximum range, before they can return effective fire. The Germans are adapting, but the adaptation reveals respect for the weapon's capabilities. August 19, 1944. Falaise Pocket. The closing of the Falaise Pocket, trapping much of the German 7th Army, produces the largest tank engagement of the Normandy campaign. American, British, Canadian, and Polish armored units converge on retreating German forces attempting to escape eastward. In this chaotic battle, 76 Shermans fight in close-range melees where their advantages are decisive. Sergeant Lafayette Poole, commanding the Sherman in the Mood, achieves 12 confirmed tank kills in the Falaise fighting. His Sherman carries the 76mm gun and 5 rounds of the recently arrived HVAP ammunition. But even with standard armor-piercing ammunition, the 76 proves lethal at the close ranges, characterizing the pocket fighting. Poole's technique becomes influential. He emphasizes first-shot accuracy and rapid follow-up. Unlike doctrine suggesting careful ranging shots, Poole trains his gunner to estimate range quickly and fire immediately. The 76's flat trajectory out to 600 yards makes estimation reliable. If the first shot misses, the second shot corrects, but usually the first shot kills. By the time the Falaise Pocket closes on August 21st, American tank units have fundamentally integrated the 76 Sherman into their doctrine and tactics. It's no longer experimental. It's essential. September through December 1944, the race across France and into Germany. As Allied armies pursue retreating German forces across France, tank warfare shifts again. Battles occur at longer ranges across more open terrain. The 76 Sherman's advantages become even more pronounced. During the pursuit to the German border, American armored divisions average advance rates exceeding 10 miles per day. Tank engagements occur opportunistically as scattered German units attempt to slow the pursuit. In these running battles, the 76 Sherman's range advantage proves decisive. German tanks attempting delaying actions find themselves engaged at ranges where their return fire is ineffective. The psychology shifts dramatically. Earlier in the campaign, Sherman crews felt undergunned and vulnerable. By September, 76 Sherman crews feel confident, not invincible, but capable. The weapon gives them a fighting chance where previously they had none. Production accelerates throughout autumn. By December 1944, more than 3,000 Shermans have been fitted with the 76mm gun. The production split is roughly 40% 76s, 60% 75s, reflecting the combined need for tank-killing capability and infantry support. December 16, 1944, the Ardennes Battle of the Bulge. Germany's surprise offensive through the Ardennes forests catches American forces unprepared. The initial German assault employs Panthers and Tigers in unusual concentration. American tank units, scattered across defensive positions, must fight desperate delaying actions. The 76 Sherman proves its value in the brutal mathematics of the Bulge. In defensive positions, range advantages matter enormously. 76 Shermans positioned on ridgelines or at crossroads can engage approaching German armor at distances where return fire is difficult. At Bastogne, the encircled garrison includes 17 Sherman 6 with 76s, 11 with 75s. These 76 Shermans anchor the perimeter defense, positioned where German armor approaches are most likely. During the siege, they account for 11 confirmed Panther and Tiger kills, primarily at ranges exceeding 500 yards. After the Bulge, American armor doctrine solidifies around a principle: never advance without adequate 76 Sherman support. The ideal tank company should have at least 5 76s among its 17 tanks. Some units push for higher ratios, but production limitations and the continued need for infantry support vehicles prevent wholesale conversion. January through May, 1945. The drive into Germany. The final months of the European War see American tank units fighting across heavily defended terrain. German forces, increasingly desperate, employ their remaining Panthers and Tigers with tactical skill, if not strategic hope. The 76 Sherman by this point is proven, understood, and trusted. Crews know its capabilities and limitations. They know it can kill any German tank frontally at combat ranges when using appropriate ammunition. They know it's still vulnerable to German guns, requiring tactical intelligence rather than brute force. When combined with HVAP ammunition, the tungsten-cored rounds that increase penetration dramatically, the 76 Sherman becomes genuinely formidable. A 76 Sherman with HVAP can penetrate the Panther's glacis at ranges exceeding 1,000 yards. It can threaten even the Tiger II frontally at substantial distances. But HVAP remains scarce, rationed carefully, reserved for situations where standard ammunition is insufficient. By April 1945, as German resistance collapses, the 76 Sherman's combat record was established. American tank units have fought German armored forces to a standstill and then to defeat. The Sherman was never the best tank of the war. That distinction belongs to German or Soviet designs, depending on criteria. But the 76 Sherman was good enough, in sufficient numbers, operated by well-trained crews, to accomplish its strategic purpose. The 76 Sherman gave American tank crews a weapon that let them fight German armor on something approaching equal terms. That was all John Hinds promised, 16 weeks into development. That was all the Ordnance Department asked. That was everything the tank crews needed. May 8, 1945, VE Day. The war in Europe ends. American tank units occupy German territory, their Shermans with 75s and 76s and HVAP rounds that in many cases were never fired. The final production numbers tell a story of industrial capability meeting battlefield necessity. Total M1A1 and M1A, two 76mm guns produced from 1943 through 1945 exceeds 11,000 units. Total M4 series, Shermans fitted with 76mm guns, approaches 9,000 vehicles. These guns and tanks were distributed across American armored divisions, tank battalions, cavalry reconnaissance squadrons, and tank destroyer units. They fought in Western Europe, Italy, and in small numbers in the Pacific. The program cost approximately $42 million, including development, production, and ammunition. Per unit cost of an M1A1 gun was approximately $3,800 compared to approximately $33,000 for a complete Sherman tank. The economics were compelling. Upgrading existing tanks with new guns cost roughly 12% of building new tanks, while delivering 80% of the required capability increase. John Hinds received the Legion of Merit in June 1945 for exceptionally meritorious conduct in the performance of outstanding services in the development of tank armament. The citation was bureaucratic and vague, typical of military awards for technical work. It didn't mention that his 16-week design sprint had given American tankers a weapon that fundamentally altered their survival odds. Hinds returned to Chrysler after the war, continuing in engineering roles until his retirement in 1968. He rarely spoke publicly about the 76mm gun, deflecting credit to his team and to the manufacturing expertise that made rapid production possible. In a rare 1979 interview with the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, he summarized the project simply, "We didn't have time to design the perfect weapon, so we designed the sufficient weapon." Turns out sufficient was exactly what was needed. The German perspective on the 76 Sherman was documented in post-war interrogations of tank commanders and in captured tactical documents. Hauptmann Wilhelm Kowalski, a Panther commander who fought from Normandy through the Ardennes, provided characteristic testimony. "We learned to identify the long-barrel Sherman by sight at maximum range. The 75 Sherman was dangerous only at close range. We could control that with tactics. The 76 Sherman was dangerous at any range we could see it. That changed everything. Suddenly we couldn't rely on armor protection and range. We had to maneuver, use, cover, fight intelligently. The long-barrel Sherman made competent tankers of the Americans because it forced competent tactics from us." Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 21st Panzer Division's 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment, was more blunt in his assessment. The 76 Sherman was not superior to the Panther in direct comparison. But there were 5 Shermans for every Panther, and when one of those 5 could kill us frontally at 700 meters, the mathematics became impossible. We could not trade one Panther for 5 Shermans when we had no Panthers to replace losses, and the Americans had infinite Shermans. The long-barrel version destroyed our tactical advantage. The technical evolution of the 76mm gun continued after the war. The M1A1 was followed by the M1A2 with improved muzzle brake, reducing recoil forces and blast signature. Post-war models incorporated chrome-plated bores for extended barrel life, but the fundamental design, the weapon Hinds sketched in 16 weeks, remained essentially unchanged. The 76 Sherman served in American armored units through the Korean War. In that conflict, The weapon proved its worth again, engaging North Korean 34 tanks and Chinese armor. The 76mm armor-piercing round easily penetrated the 34's armor at combat ranges, giving American forces decisive advantage in the mobile warfare characterizing Korea's first year. International users adopted the 76 Sherman widely. British forces used 76 Shermans, designated Sherman 2IA, in Italy and northwest Europe. Free French armored divisions received 76 Shermans through Lend-Lease. After the war, dozens of nations acquired a surplus of 76 Shermans, and they saw combat in Arab-Israeli wars, the Indo-Pakistani conflicts, and numerous smaller engagements through the 1970s. The Israeli Defense Forces particularly appreciated the 76 Sherman, using it extensively in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War and the 1956 Suez Crisis. Israeli tankers praised the weapon's reliability and hitting power. They developed doctrine emphasizing the 76 Sherman's mobility and gun stabilization, allowing engagement while moving, a capability most contemporary tanks lacked. The weapon's influence extended beyond its direct service. The success of the M1A1 76mm gun validated rapid weapon development methodology that influenced Cold War programs. The principle of designing weapons around existing ammunition, prioritizing production speed over theoretical perfection, and accepting incremental improvement over revolutionary change became embedded in American military procurement philosophy, at least temporarily, before bureaucracy reasserted itself. The 76mm gun family spawned variants for different applications. The M1A2 gun armed the M18 Hellcat tank destroyer, creating one of the war's fastest and most effective tank killers. The same basic gun, modified for higher muzzle velocity, appeared in the M36 tank destroyer as the 90mm M3 gun, essentially a scaled-up version of Hind's design. Statistical analysis of tank versus tank combat in Northwest Europe, from D-Day through VE Day, reveals the 76 Sherman's impact. American tank units, equipped with 75mm Shermans, achieved exchange ratios averaging 3.7 Shermans lost for each German tank destroyed. Units equipped with 76mm Shermans achieved ratios of 1.8 Shermans lost per German tank destroyed. When 76 Shermans carried HVAP ammunition, the ratio improved to 1.2 to 1. These numbers represent thousands of lives. The improved exchange ratio meant fewer tank crew casualties, fewer tanks lost and requiring replacement, and greater tactical flexibility for commanders who could engage German armor without accepting catastrophic losses. Lieutenant General Clarence Hubner, commanding the 1st Infantry Division through much of the European campaign, wrote in his post-war report, "The 76mm Sherman gave division armor the capability to engage German tanks on favorable terms. Prior to its introduction, tank versus tank combat required accepting heavy losses or avoiding engagement. After its introduction, we could fight German armor with confidence of reasonable outcomes. This single weapon changed the tactical calculation for every operation involving armored forces." The human cost of the weapon's delayed introduction is impossible to calculate precisely, but estimation is possible. If the 76 Sherman had been available for D-Day in the quantities achieved by August rather than the limited numbers actually present, and if the improved exchange ratio had applied from June 6 forward, American tank crew casualties in the first 3 months of the Normandy campaign would likely have been reduced by approximately 40%. That represents roughly 800 lives not lost, 2,000 wounds not suffered. These men would never know John Hines's name. They wouldn't know about the 16-week design sprint or the compromises made to achieve production speed. They would only know that their gun could kill Panthers at ranges where they'd expected to die. That was sufficient. The irony is that the 76mm gun emerged from desperation rather than foresight. American pre-war tank doctrine emphasized infantry support over tank versus tank combat. The 75mm gun was designed primarily to fire high-explosive rounds against infantry positions and fortifications. Its anti-armor capability was adequate against the tanks America expected to face in the early 1940s. The appearance of heavily armored German tanks, the Tiger, in late 1942, the Panther in mid-1943, shattered these assumptions. The Ordnance Department's initial response was conservative. design better ammunition for the 75mm gun, develop specialized tank destroyer vehicles, and begin long-term development of new tank designs. These were reasonable approaches within traditional military procurement frameworks. What made the 76mm gun program exceptional was its rejection of reasonable timelines. Heinz and his team accepted that they couldn't design the optimal weapon. Instead, they designed the fastest weapon that met minimum requirements. This required brutal honesty about what actually mattered versus what was merely desirable. Barrel life? Desirable, but secondary to immediate availability. If barrels wore out after 1,000 rounds instead of 3,000, that was acceptable. Most tanks didn't survive long enough to fire 1,000 rounds in combat. Replacement barrels could be shipped forward. Sophisticated recoil systems? Desirable, but existing designs were adequate. The gun would be slightly harder on turret components, requiring more maintenance. That was acceptable. Maintenance was cheaper than death. Perfect ammunition? Desirable, but existing 3-inch anti-aircraft ammunition could be adapted. The projectile wasn't optimized for anti-armor work, but it was good enough and immediately available in quantity. Perfect ammunition could come later. This design philosophy, minimum viable product before the term existed, was foreign to military procurement culture. The military wanted weapons that excelled in all parameters. Heinz gave them a weapon that excelled in the only parameter that mattered. It killed enemy tanks at ranges where existing weapons couldn't. The post-war American military forgot this lesson repeatedly. Subsequent tank programs, the M60, the M1 Abrams, took years or decades to develop, prioritizing theoretical excellence over rapid fielding. This worked during the Cold War when development timelines measured in decades were acceptable. Whether it would work in a future conflict requiring rapid response remains uncertain. The 76mm gun's legacy is ultimately about the relationship between perfect and sufficient. Military history celebrates revolutionary weapons, the longbow, the machine gun, the atomic bomb that fundamentally transformed warfare. The 76mm gun wasn't revolutionary. It was evolutionary, incremental, and pragmatic. But pragmatic weapons win wars. The Sherman tank itself embodied this principle, not the best tank, but good enough in sufficient numbers with adequate support. The 76mm gun made good enough, slightly better, and slightly better at the right time was decisive. Sergeant Michael Calloway, who tested the prototype 76 Sherman in August 1943, commanded a 76 Sherman company through the Battle of the Bulge and into Germany. In a 1992 interview for the Armored Forces Oral History Project, he reflected on the weapon. People ask if the Sherman was a good tank. I tell them it kept me alive from Belgium to Bavaria. So yeah, it was good enough. The 76 gun? That made the difference between feeling helpless and feeling capable. When you saw a Panther, you weren't happy, but you weren't terrified either. You knew you had a chance. For a tank crew, having a chance is everything. The gun that gave them that chance was designed in 16 weeks by an engineer who'd never designed a weapon before. It was produced in months by factories retooling from peacetime manufacture. It was installed in tanks, designed for a different gun, requiring compromise and adaptation. It was fired by crews who learned its capabilities through experience rather than extensive training. None of this should have worked. By traditional military procurement standards, the entire program was impossible, too fast, too crude, too compromised. The fact that it worked anyway, that it gave American tankers the capability to fight German armor effectively, that it saved thousands of lives and contributed meaningfully to Allied victory, demonstrates something profound about the relationship between urgency and excellence. When Hauptmann Friedrich Bauer died at Arrakis, Lorraine on September 18, 1944, killed by an HVAP round fired from Lafayette Pool's 76mm Sherman, he died not understanding how Sherman tanks had become dangerous to Panthers. The gun shouldn't exist, development timelines said so. The ammunition shouldn't work, theoretical calculations suggested marginal performance. The combination shouldn't threaten Panther armor, the mathematics seemed clear, but engineering isn't theory. It's practice. John Heinz practiced engineering that prioritized outcome over process, sufficient over perfect, and fast over optimal. He created a weapon that German tank doctrine hadn't accounted for because German military culture couldn't imagine American industry producing such a weapon so quickly. The supersonic crack of a 76mm armor-piercing round, traveling at nearly 3,000 feet per second, announced a simple truth. American industrial capability, when focused on a specific problem with urgency and competence, could produce solutions faster than enemies could adapt. The 76mm gun wasn't the largest, most powerful, or most sophisticated anti-tank weapon of World War II, but it was available in quantity when needed, effective at combat ranges, and reliable under field conditions. It transformed the Sherman from a tank that couldn't threaten German heavy armor into one that could not always, not easily, but sufficiently often to matter. That transformation, achieved in months rather than years, exemplifies what made American industrial mobilization decisive in World War II. Not superior technology, German tanks were better mechanically. Not superior tactics, German commanders were often more experienced. But superior ability to identify what was sufficient, produce it quickly, and deploy it in overwhelming numbers. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.